Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Annie, for inviting me to the conference. I've been hearing it. It's going on great. So it's fantastic to be here. So I am going to talk about autonomous operations. And in our, if I work for, so my name is Banerjee. As Annie said, I work for Netcracker Technology. And one of the things that we help operators is to go to become more automated, to become more streamlined, and make sure that when they're taking the steps into 5G, that it's more zero touch, it's more automated, and it's more evolved than what it used to be. So autonomous operations, in my opinion, is the next step in the OSS evolution. And what is it? And why am I talking about it? Let's just get into the the more meat of it, really. So operations automation is without a doubt the most critical aspect of 5G success. We know that the boundaries are being redefined between cloud, edge, and on-premise networks. Service providers must increase levels of automation to demand on-demand digital services with optimal performance, with security, and so on. Then obviously cost is a big parameter, right? We can provision anything, but at a lower total cost of ownership, making the cost of operations low. Automation will obviously enable new technologies such as 5G, and with 5G comes obviously network slicing, edge type of services, and so on. So there is a whole, the 5G provides a whole mechanism to kind of transform the business environment for operators, right? So more 5G, private 5G network, more enterprise-centric services, working more and more with their partners, and so on and so forth. So if we look at the challenges, right, the biggest challenge is really around the delivery of on-demand services, scaling on demand. Complex network environment is given, because now it's not just about physical networks. You have virtual network functions, you have some of the cloud network functions, CNFs, and obviously a whole lot of physical network functions as well, multi-vendor environment, and so on. Makes it a lot more challenging. Plus, obvious reasons for the challenge that continues is the interworking with the legacy environment. We are also seeing a lot of multi-cloud adoption. And that becomes interesting because now it's not just about on-premises services or managed services anymore, but it's about mixing telco cloud with public cloud, highly distributed environment with the multi-access edge kind of services. 5G network slicing becoming more and more prevalent, and we see use cases slowly coming to the market that people have talked about in the labs, we've talked about in different POCs, etc., but slowly come to market. In fact, yesterday we announced our partnership with Etisalat around helping them provide end-to-end business enterprise services to the oil and natural gas industries based on a private 5G network that is on the whole core of that thing is the whole 5G core is on a hyperscale network. Interesting use cases for enterprise customers, for the telco, for one of their largest enterprise customers. We just launched that yesterday, and I think that's a very interesting use case, and we'll see more of that. We are seeing some automotive use cases. We are seeing some of the other use cases as well. So this is slowly going to become more and more prevalent, but that means that operators need to move to a much more of a dynamic service delivery environment. So what they need today is really our real-time, on-demand, guaranteed service delivery. And that becomes very critical when we talk about 5G success. And that is where the whole role of operations automation becomes so critical. So we believe that automated service delivery across the hybrid network is not a small task. It's not a trivial task. There is your older OSS environment that exists. On top of that, you're talking about an environment which needs more next generation type of orchestration enablement, as well as enabling a hybrid network and also on. So the operation environment needs to be able to traverse and address services that cross traditional OSS services, SDN NFV environment, as well as NFV silos and so on. New organizational approach becomes more important. The, the decoupling of some of those static functions that exist within OSS 6 need to be made more modular, more decoupled. So what it gets into is really around an OSS environment, which is cloud native, which tackles multi-cloud environment, which is real time. And obviously, open APIs and intent-based models becomes important. And when we talk about autonomous, it's not about just coding and creating a process, but it's really about self-learning. So the role of AI becomes very, very important. So let's look at some of those as we talk about a new approach to operations environment. We tend to call it the domain-based approach, and we are seeing many of our customers adopting this domain-based approach as they move into their new operations and automations environment. So what is really a domain-specific orchestration or domain-specific automation? I think this involves collapsing the existing services and network environment silos by merging together operation capabilities that traverses traditional OSS, network orchestration, and SDN-based management and control. So bringing those together, breaking those silos that have always existed, and to make it seamless across the entire aspects of all the different facets of network that makes up an operator's environment. Domains can be defined in many different ways. So for example, domain can be a network technology, it could be a geographic region, it could be any of, it could be for example, a service such as a virtual CP or so on. So you can define domains in such different ways. Operators can define domains and develop a strategy for automating them incrementally based on their business needs and based on their existing organizational capabilities. I mean, we are seeing a shift in the market where the full-scale end-to-end OSS transformation projects that we used to do 10 years back are slowly moving away to more a business-driven OSS transformation. And that's where this domain orchestration or the domain automation becomes so fundamental. In most tier one operators across the world, most group level operators, you can pick any of them really, we see them more allocating domain based on networks. So breaking up the network between edge, transport, and core, and then automating them in parts so that it's not that you're just doing a huge big transformation where edge, transport, core is all done big bang and all together. So some of the network services, so you'll see this is not really creating one other silo really. It's about automating in parts and then making sure that the parts work from east to west really, and work with the other part of it. And operators can start from anywhere, right? We have seen operators starting from automation of the transport, moving towards edge. Some of the operators we have seen start from the core and start to move towards transport and edge. Depends on their choice, depending on where they are and where their main problems are really. Though the network is broken up into distinct domains, right? If you look at MEC or edge services, it's not so clear cut really. MEC services are highly complex, we know, and with the whole latency requirements and performance requirements, this can reside on multiple edge hosts, right? It could be in multiple locations, it could be on premise, it could be network edge, it could be in certain regions, it could be in the core, and so may use. So in this case, for some of these aspects, especially for MEC, it's about end-to-end automation across all these different domains, in fact. So let's look at some of the things that makes this domain orchestration more automated and more autonomous. So if you look at some of the things, some of the elements of why autonomous domain becomes much more critical, it's really about bringing together the design element with CI/CD, service and network orchestration. Obviously, bring together your OSS elements, though there are certain fundamental shifts that has happened in the way the today's OSS is versus the way OSS has been, let's say 10 years back. So more active inventory. As we know, inventory used to be very, very passive. It used to be offline. More and more, we are saying we have to make sure that the inventory is much more active. Discovery and reconciliation, for example. It used to be done once in a while, once a week, once in a few days, whatever the business rules allowed. Now it has to be done much more in a dynamic fashion, much more incrementally, and much more in real time. Much more alignment between activation or fulfillment and device management and configuration. And this is where device modeling, such as the Tosca and others, comes into play. Yang models, for example, comes into play. And obviously, the last but not the least, your AI and ML and analytics playing a major role. One aspect of that, which is important, is really around the closed loop assurance part of it, which becomes very much a part of this autonomous domain operations environment. The other is the self-learning part. So it's not about creating process and workflows all the time. It is also about the system learning, making sure it's adapted, and then bringing those operations and processes back into the system, making it much more dynamic, much more user-friendly, and obviously a much more distributed for operators who are deploying these for their multi-cloud environments. Let's talk about a few examples of where we have used domain orchestration for tier one operators in some of the very challenging and I would say very interesting projects across the globe. I'm going to start with from the far, from the core. Let's start with Etisalat, and I talked about that a little bit back. Etisalat UAE is creating a new business model for enterprise customers in the UAE by automating cloud-native 5G core services and their mission-critical multi-access edge services through hosting on a distributed hyperscaler edge cloud kind of platform. So the target is industrial IoT. The target is the oil and natural gas industry with comprehensive kind of range of cloud-based offerings, from a 5G connectivity, 5G applications, and so on and so forth. A very interesting model. As I mentioned before, the press release went out yesterday. So please take a look at it. The second one is a very interesting project that we did for Deutsche Telekom in 2019. Again, that's a press release we had done, so there's a lot of the details as well. This is about bringing together a whole bunch of optical IP, MPLS kind of network elements and network vendors to make sure to create a single flow of traffic steering and multi-layer path compute to automate the whole transport kind of operations. A very interesting project. A lot of the devices were Israelized. Some of them were not. Some of them were still EMS and MS. Some of them were, NFV compliant. Some of them were not. So it was an interesting mix of it. What they wanted to do was very challenging. They wanted to do multi-country IPVPN. They wanted to do zero-touch provisioning. They wanted to make sure that anybody can go into a self-service portal and order for multi-country VPN, and that can be provisioned instantaneously. So very interesting project, interesting problem to have. And what we did was use our transport domain orchestration to make sure that that can be done very effectively and with some of the challenges that they were part of. So what were the benefits? So digitalizing these complex functions helped Deutsche Telekom to gain end-to-end network insight, automate their complex service provisioning processes, and obviously massively reduce their cost and effort. In the Netcracker solution, integrated with dozens of IP devices and instant controllers for more than about 6 major hardware vendors in the market. After this project was done, I'm going to, DT moved on to a different project, and that was an interesting project, which is around the edge where our edge domain orchestration became an important part of it. In this case, it was to automate Deutsche Telekom's B2B services across a multi-vendor SD-WAN, LAN, and Wi-Fi environment, a lot of the edge services. This included, we were responsible for all aspects of this cloud-based solution, which was built, deployed, and as well as, it's been delivered as managed operations for the customer. The solution is hosted on a public cloud, ensuring that the global scalability is, if needed by the clients, it's available. So different domains, different customers, and automating them in parts, going with the business initiatives, going with the focus of different business units. What makes it most important is that every single domain that we talk about is self-sufficient, is autonomous, and it enables, and it doesn't really create a silo. It automates the domains and makes sure it's the east-west integration of that, which is standard-based with open APIs, so that you operate other one way it's interoperating with the legacy environment for the other zones, if that's what's where the operator is, or it slowly gets into the other parts of automation environment so that it works together in a much more seamless way. Now, there is a part of domain orchestration, but there is also the whole point of how do you stitch it all together, right? So cross-domain orchestration plays a massive and a very important role here. It is about connecting the automation of each domain in a single pane of glass. So Netcracker's end-to-end service orchestration enables digital services by consolidating an end-to-end view in real time across all technology and cloud domains. It's a single pane of glass, enabling automation of all aspects of cross-domain automation and network slices, from a design, from a deployment, lifecycle management, optimization, capacity management, and an assurance standpoint. And again, you can have that in a multi-cloud environment. Many of our orchestration are running in the hyperscale environment today. And in many cases, it's also running in a multi-cloud environment, which is a mix of the operator's cloud, could be Netcracker's cloud for hyperscalers and others and so on. So that's not a constraint. The whole point of having cloud native technology is to be able to make sure that where it's deployed is never a constraint for the operators. So let me talk about a bit about the cross-domain orchestration, right? So what does it really mean, and how does it enable some of it? Now, the cross-domain orchestration brings together, obviously, design, the catalog, the inventory, the service orchestration assurance. But from a process standpoint, it's about enabling or taking in service intent. So it's a service intent, as we know, is the foundation of intent-based automation or orchestration. And with that intent, it's more of a business intent that comes in or gets entered through a portal or self-service or whatever environment the operators are taking those intents or the orders. Service orchestration is absolutely the one big part of it, because it automates end-to-end service lifecycle. But what it really does is beyond that. So one is creating the dynamic service models, predefined on the fly, creating and storing the service model in a service catalog, which executes the intent, having the real-time view of service state, etc., in a service inventory environment. And obviously then it's about measuring and making sure that all the services, it meets the SLAs, there's a predictive and preventative AI operations, and a whole closed loop service management environment. So it's about intent, and then it's about delivering that in a very cross-domain sort of way, but making sure that it's predictive, it meets the SLAs, it's about AI operations and so on. I mean, if you think about it, right, in the past, if you go back 10, 15 years, it used to be two distinct domains. One was around service fulfillment or activation. Order comes in, service fulfill, design and assign happens. You look at the resource catalog and the service catalog, align that, and do service activation. And then comes the assurance process done by somebody else. with service intent, with enterprise services, with 5G, the boundaries and the layers of between service activation, service assurance, as well as device or config management used to be a whole different domain by itself, are all kind of coming together. And on top of that, it's not about technical orders that needs to be entered into the system, or a very complex system that takes in the service order and then the complex thing, does the decomp. The service intent is a simple business way of entering the order, and then your underlying system should be able to take that business intent and then decouple that and then orchestrate that across different networks, different environments, different cloud environment. It could be also a distributed environment. So a seamless play across all these becomes absolutely mission critical. And that's what the automating through the cross-domain services becomes an important aspect of service automation. So when we talk about autonomous operations, why do we think the approach is transformation? It's really around three things, right? Bringing a more of an agile way of doing service provisioning and fulfillment and assurance. It's much more innovative in a way because you are not talking about a big bang approach where you're talking about automation in parts. And obviously, because you're doing that with the business owners and with different piece parts of the operator's organization, it's much more profitable and it's much more result oriented. So it's about no silos, it's about zero touch. And obviously, it's about learning and adapting. It's not very, text-driven or very script-driven process automation, but it's about self-learning, self-adapting, using AI ML to understand the process a little bit better and bringing it back to the system. That whole closed-loop approach, all of that becomes very, very transformational. The bigger part is moving towards a much more of a real-time environment and making sure that it is cloud enabled. And it's when we say cloud enabled, it's any type of cloud, whether it's on-premise, whether it's multi-cloud, whether it's a hyperscaler cloud. It's a combination of that. Doesn't really matter, but should be able to handle all of those things. And it should be able to do things in functional decomps rather than being able to say that, well, you have to do this whole thing by itself, or there's no other approach. So giving operators the choice to be able to do this transformation depending on their business needs. So one other aspect which is becoming very critical today is around Open RAN, domain orchestration around Open RAN. Now, as I'm going to talk quickly about it. Why is automation becoming critical for new Open RAN? Now, there is a foundational shift in the market, right? There is obviously the incumbent network equipment vendors who are providing the big boxes around 5G core network, etc., Open RAN, all of those things. Those are much more of a closed RAN, boxes, etc., that's coming from the incumbent, which is one way of doing things. The other is really about operators choosing a much more distributed, much more open, much more multi-vendor environment, which goes into this whole foundation, the principle of Open RAN. So it's a distributed architecture. It's multi-vendor. So CU, DU coming from somebody, your antennas coming from somebody, different code coming from somebody. So all of these different elements of 5G coming from different people. It's a multi-vendor putting it together. So when you talk about multi-vendor environment and an open kind of an architecture environment where other piece parts from other vendors can work together, it makes an interesting value proposition. Obviously, the cost goes down, but also the challenges around how do you bring it all together in a seamless way so that it works the same way or better than the way the incumbents have provided their 5G equipment. So this is a major role where NEC, our parent company, and Netcracker plays in a very significant way. So NEC provides a lot of the open 5G infrastructure around the RAN RU, their 5G SA core, as well as their whole system integration services, and Netcracker comes with their whole RAN orchestration, the whole automation stack here, and obviously our BSS or monetization stack for B2B2X kind of an enablement standpoint. We are working with a lot of our customers around this combination with Rakuten, with Etisalat, with Docomo, bunch of names here, where we are doing Open RAN deployment, working together with our parent company. And very quickly, automation and scale, when you talk about cross-domain orchestration, it's really about bringing together some of those elements around service orchestration, XNF or orchestration, as well as the raw real-time RIC, which maximizes RAN optimization with AI/ML. That becomes a very important part of the overall automation to the RAN domain. I know I'm out of time, so I'm going to go very quickly. Real-time RIC is very much part of the RAN optimization here, and this is something that Netcracker provides in the stack with NEC, and this has been deployed at different customers across the globe. One is the key things for it is really around training your AI models to use them for optimizing use cases, and obviously collecting data from Open RAN infrastructure and creating that whole enabler for 5G network slicing and other 5G related use cases. So just to wrap it up, autonomous operations is really going beyond process automation to a new level of intelligent automation with self-learning, reasoning, and adaptation capability, which enables self-management. It enables zero-touch provisioning, and some of the things that we have been talking for a while. Key parts of that is obviously around end-to-end 5G operations, fully autonomous operations such as enabling some of the 5G use cases around network slicing, edge cloud, automating the transport and the core, some of the examples that I talked about, and obviously making it much more intent-driven, cross-domain, and having AI ops for self-learning and zero touch. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Annie, to the team. Thank you very much for listening, and I probably went up way beyond my time, but
no, you've got 2 minutes for questions, Ari. So that was very nicely done. So Justin says, you talk about Open RAN domain orchestration, but what about existing, i.e. physical RAN domain orchestration?
So the physical RAN orchestration, depending on how you're architecting it, hold on, let me just stop the share, I think. Yeah, I think the existing RAN orchestration is going to be there because that's part of the model, and you have to do that because that's where it is today. But as we move into the Open RAN becomes more challenging, in my opinion, because it's typically a multi-vendor approach. Typical RAN would come from a single vendor with their enabling tools, with their management tools. We have to, as a OSS vendor, we have to provision, we have to manage those as well. But it tends to be slightly less challenging than the Open RAN because then it has got multiple different parts coming from multiple different vendors that needs to work together. That's why I focus more on the Open RAN rather than the legacy RAN or the way the 5G RAN is done. Okay, and a quick question about APIs.
Really, is Netcracker, could you do more to work on developing a set of standards and minimum APIs from vendors? I think Netcracker is really involved with TM Forum in the APIs.
Yes, we are. And we are also working with ORAN Alliance. We are working with the 3GPP. We are working with ONAP. We are working with all the standard bodies. This is a big initiative for the company. Open APIs, keeping it open, working with third parties, working with partners. We have a very significant partnership alliance with many vendors across the board, which becomes part of our ecosystem 2.0 initiative that we have launched like 3 to 4 years back. And that goes into the whole NFV marketplace, etc., that we launched the market, which is prepackaged work with different vendors who are our partners and bringing them together so that the onboarding time for NFVs or VNFs, etc., are much more reduced. Open API is working with TM Forum. We have worked with TM Forum for many years. In fact, into that 2019, in fact, a few years back, when OpenAPI, the 1 year, in fact, when TM Forum gave an award for OpenAPI adoption, Netcracker won that award. That was the only time when Forum gave that excellence award. So we continue doing work. We continue doing work with ONAP, continue with all ORAN Alliance, and all the standard bodies. And that's a big part of Netcracker strategy, to not to be closed, to be open, to be moving forward with the industry ecosystem.
Do you think, though, on open APIs in general, I mean, the whole point is everybody needs to, all the vendors need to take that approach for it to be really successful and to reach its full potential. And on a scale of 1 to 10, Ari, how far along would you say the industry is?
Still early. So there are two aspects of it. One, yes, that you have to be part of the program to be able to work with each other and all of that. That's one part of the program. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is, when we talk about some of the open APIs that's out there, for example, TM Forum and others, a lot of them are not yet, how can you put it, industry level. So in the sense that you deployment level. So it's a shell still. It's not production grade, right? Because when we do any deployment, a lot of times, sometimes we contribute back, sometimes we don't, right? And we, as well as any of the other vendors, are in the same boat, really. So the API that's there is great for a science project in many cases, but is that a production ready? Not so much. So there are two aspects. One is people have to adopt more, sure. That's a given, and I think that's the industry slowly going towards that. But the other is how production ready is that. And again, it's very difficult, by the way. Every operator's environment will use, let's say, an order API or a sales order API or a quote API in a very different way. And that's the secret sauce, right? You take the shell, you take it and you make it there. Does it get back to the production? So I take an open API off the shelf, let's say from TM Forum. Can I use that in an operator's environment? Not really, because they have a very unique requirement. So there are two aspects of it. It's a philosophical battle, but at a high level, we need to do better, to adopt more, to be open. Where are we today? We are still at maybe 3 out of 10 as an industry, not generally. Yeah.
Well, Ari, thank you very much, and thank you for being so frank. So that was a really good session. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Especially for starting early and at short notice. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation.